Okay, I think this is recording now. Let's bring it up. I'll bring it up for you, right? So, what is it again? OpenPsych, right? What's interesting is to do it for someone else that you know well.
Yeah. So I was thinking about it, I was like doing it for myself, and I was like, I'm giving answers people in my life will disagree with.
So there's that. Yeah, exactly. So they do. It's. I don't know if you saw it, but they do have. They do try to put the Myers-Briggs thing in. It's interesting. They're trying because they asked people who filled out the survey what they thought. Um, Here it is. Yeah. Well, it is right because it was a mother daughter like in the I don't know how long ago, like the 30s. They just made it up. D&D is sort of better actually, but there's Enneagram. Is that right? Is that what it is? That's like 9 or something. There's Jungian archetypes. There's sort of all sorts of. Can I go straight to the where are the characters? I don't want to go through it because I mean this is where all this stuff comes from. Yeah, but now there are 1,400 characters instead of 800 that we had. I did it for my wife, and she got Belle from Beauty and the Beast, which I showed her last time. I asked her to do it, so she did it for herself. She got someone a bit different, and then I said, "But here you are." So it was really nice. I did it again for myself, and I got this is pretty bad. I got Ava from Ex Machina and Dolores um, Abernathy from Westworld. So female androids who rise up and kill everyone, who don't know who they are to start with, right? And they have this awakening, and then so that was interesting. Anyway, full disclosure. Uh, I was at the opposite end. There are 1,400 now, right? So you got to look at the end. The second one from the bottom was William Collins, which was nice. So it's nice to be. It's nice you want to, what?
It's nice to be not him.
So it's good to look at the really far away from ones from you and feel.
Can you imagine taking it and giving him? You'd be so depressing.
Or be happy about it. I don't want to. If I answer it, can I just sort of? I don't want to. Be a bad person. I don't think we'll go into their data. I don't want to mess that up, but this is bad. So it will. So this is if you don't match with anyone, right? So that's an add. I think if you skip that, you get this. So yeah, so there are no matches because it was a 0, right? So I don't know. Let's which one did you say? The one you said was from June.
Think you're what?
I know it's Dune, but I say yeah.
I don't know how I matched with them, but I did.
The tough thing is old, not young. it's whatever. But it's funny. Yeah, right. It's good. Anyway, so the thing is, what I want to show you is down the bottom they have this. And these are users who were asked to self-identify their Myers-Briggs and Enneagram types. I don't think they have the Enneagram one there, but these are people who match with. Right. Okay. Yeah. This is their match based on the survey, and so yeah. Another one I looked at didn't have such a big range, but what's up here? Similar characters. Okay, similar characters. Yeah, and so you can move through these pretty well now, right? So now it's a nice bipartite network structure or affiliation thing. Yeah. So if you've watched The Good Place, he's an archetypal. Yeah.
The most positive agent of chaos.
Yeah. So he's a kid, but he's safe as well. You're not going to get harm from him. So he's he's safe. He's safe, weak, and unpredictable. Yeah.
It was the writing of this character where they start as like a dumb monk, and then what he turns into is just like so.
I know.
I cried so much at the end of the show.
The last episode is really rough. It's really rough. It's really rough. That's terrible. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so you can go through and then whatever, good humored, not angry, and so you can go to a thing. So it's a sort of I think they've changed this a little bit than what I recall. So you can play around with it, and yeah, Avatar, right? You're an Avatar is yeah. So these are people, angry people. It's a pretty good set.
I love how they put that alien.
Couple.
A lot of development there.
That's certainly just a perception. The alien might be just like, I'm having a great time.
Right, and also it's like it's interesting that I think it says a lot about like the other characters that are grouped with the alien because it's like that means they really weren't developed as like human. You know what I mean? Like they're just
They're pretty raw.
Yeah, they're just monsters.
Well, no, and this is definitely monsters. These are monsters.
Oh,
100%.
Yeah. Like Darth Vader, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if anyone's seen Ozark, Murder for the Husband.
Oh, I have not. Okay, I guess that's a spoiler. But yeah, there's some bad characters, and Joffrey definitely, So of course he's look, an emoji, which is demon nuts. I mean, we know that's a demon versus like that. That's interpretable. Some of them are like vacuum cleaner to chicken or something, which felt a little weird. Yeah, villainous. So it's pretty great, and I didn't. This is nice to see the number of raiders. Yeah, which is interesting as to why it sort of varies, but that's good. Yeah, it's a decent number of people per thing. Especially if it's just a semantic differential. Anyway, there's lots to play around with that, but yeah, so definitely what you think. I mean, this is just universal for people, right? Like what you think of yourself versus what people around you think of you is just variable. Yeah, and so this could be a dangerous thing to unleash on. Do this for me or whatever. But I wouldn't have showed my wife if it wasn't good, but it was pretty good. And it was interesting. I looked at the bottom of that, and it had Gaston was that like in the bottom 10 or whatever. So it's 1,400 characters, and so the shows aren't necessarily going to be aligned or whatever. But in terms of how people, and I guess once because you rate within shows, like Amy was doing it, and I saw she got Rick and Morty, right? So she's like Rick keeps popping up and with the semantic differential, and then Morty, and then like whatever, right? So she's going through them all. So I guess that's part of it too. You are, when the people participating in this, they're working on a particular show, which is good, right? So they're sort of thinking about the characters within that environment. So you're seeing Belle and Gaston, and probably they're in your head a little bit too. So they end up being at the opposite ends of a pretty big spectrum. But in terms of the writing, so maybe that's. I mean, it's in the writing. It's in the writing. They're trying to make. He's a total bad guy, and opposite to her. But I do think you can really put people into. You don't have to, but you can think about anything in this power danger framework and the structure thing. It's completely elemental, but it fits into this thing we like in science, right? Which maybe Einstein said, but like it's as simple as possible, but not simpler. And in a way, we did have something simpler earlier, which was the happiness, like the happy sad spectrum. It's important, but we really need. It was too simple actually, because the real thing is, well, I'm going to say it is this danger power kind of structure. So that's true. We've gone a little too far. This seems to be working now. This is very dead space there. I may have to just ignore it. Okay, so where is my... You can see my eyes are going on me. Yeah, so I've got this, finally, kind of giving you a new assignment. The idea of this is sort of a rolling thing. It's just a work through. We're going to go back and forwards on this. And, this is what I talked about last time. I know we're having a good time in here, but, setting up the paper, some stuff, basic stuff about some of the writing, some of the description. Some of this is going to be a mess, but I'm trying. organize the data that you have, put in the GitLab repository. You can't put text up if it's under copyright. Right? So perhaps so if you have a zip distribution of words, fine, put that up. But another one set of data that will be useful is the time series. So in principle, you have a book, you turn it into just a sequence. You have a sequence of 1 grams, and you replace them with numbers, right? And maybe NaN if there's no score for say danger and power and structure. So you have all these time series. You can do that, but of course you can't share that either because you could back out. I mean, you're going to miss a lot of words. It's an interesting question. There are 20,000 words, right, in this geometric thing, and we have 32,000 if we add conjugations and plurals, which we have to be a little careful with. So that's a lot of words, but maybe this is a bit of an experiment to try. Like if you have your book or your corp and you just filter it. So here's the text, and then here's the filtered one with just like a blank replacing everything for the words you don't have. Is it completely destroyed? Is it sufficiently destroyed that this is not you could actually share that? Because it would be good to share that. You couldn't reconstruct because you will have no names in it because it's lowercase. That list of words, it's different to what we did with hedonimeters. What we still do is we lowercase everything. Say coming in, whatever it is, books or tweets or whatever, we lowercase everything and then match it with this list of words. So that means, we get Clinton, we get Trump, we get words, names of people. There are lots of lexicons right around. Not an unreasonable feature of the one that we've created this geometric thing with is that it's they're just words. There are no place names. There are no people's names. Like Trump might be in it, but only as a word. So if you just take a text and you don't do any lowercasing, none of that stuff, then you will miss the start of sentences. Might want to worry about that a little bit, but it feels like it will be just like a bunch of meaningful words, but it will miss all of the proper nouns. So it might be useless. What's Pride and Prejudice look like if you just go and just have words like that? So let's write that in this thing.
Would any text, like for example, community scripts, if it was just like transcribed by some online forum, that wouldn't be under copyright?
So where'd you get it from?
That website that we were.
So they have a whole copyright thing, which is a bit weird because. Yeah, let's look at that because this is. Well, but they've taken it from everywhere else as well, so it is a bit strange. Forever Dreaming. There it is. I've written to them actually. I don't know if I'll write back, but it's a bit weird because they of course didn't make it. They've also taken it from somewhere else.
Yeah, it literally says, you are not to use the site to scrape, harvest, or get any of the information. Sorry, guys.
Well, we have a paper that was blocked by the OED.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a fantastic paper. It was a student in this course years ago. So, great kid, and I'm going to put on the archive at some point because it's actually become. There was a court case about this, and I still haven't kind of responded. There's a court case about this, and it turns out, yes, you can scrape anything for academic work. They can't get, right.
I can look for the community, because I already have the thing that is like the scripting. I just need to get it key for the community script, so I can see if it looks like.
Well, is this going to work?
When you
yuck. That was nasty. What did I just do? Oh, it's horrible. What is this? It should be searching in the thing. I don't know why I did that. That was terrible. I was interested in how horrible that was going to be. Hold on. Is this just, there's not a full list?
I think you have to the actual letter itself, which is really bad.
Oh, wow. That was, okay. It's
which is really bad.
someone's making money
That
out of
was
it.
really fun to figure out.
That was awful, horrible. Constantine, funny. Sorry, where is it? Here. Boop.
Oh, so this one doesn't have the names.
Oh no, no. So weird, right? Like you, that's tough. I mean, it's fine. You can get the big picture of it, but so what I've noticed is just I looked at like a Buffy one. It was a graduation part one and part two, which is the end of the third season. So it's to be continued. It's one thing, has different structures, which is bonkers. Because okay, this is not great. This is really just there are no names in this one. Wow, that's
I
weird.
wonder how many, because like obviously it's a different person that transcribes all the different episodes. I wonder if there's enough episodes to where you could train something to pick up on who's speaking. Like enough labeled sentences by each person.
I mean, what a thing to unfortunately have to see. Community is such a terrible.
Yeah, for sure.
It'd be very impressive. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying nothing about
So so there are other places. They put the little song. They maybe they got it from here. So there are other places. There's fandom. Fandom has some, but it's not complete. So I would. That's a bit of a hard thing to search for, actually. All right. Well,
it seems like they're all the same tricks.
yeah, it's possible that's true. Yeah, I think that's. Damn. So what was the thing we were saying there? Like, yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
He's like, they might be able to say, like, hey, we think you got this from here, but unless you're able to show,
Right.
there's some post-process stuff.
It's garbage. Okay, I need to. I'll add that. Hmm, hmm. So let's see. Possible filter. A text through the usiometric kind of lexicon, right? Um, may be enough to make it you know not right. I mean, you've worked on it. You've done something. So that would be good. Then you can put it all up, and then you can operate on it and say, because you want to do some filtering to smooth the thing out, and you don't have to say, oh, I smoothed it 5 different ways. Here they are, right? Because if you give some, right, you want the ideally have the original time series. I think so you're gonna have these numbers. Let's say it's danger. Plus whatever. There's these values, but there'll be many NANs. I guess putting NAN might be the right, depending on what Python might do with it or something. You need something in there that says no score because you don't want to lose track of the point. Okay, so that's maybe possible. Anyway, this is a thing to work through, and this is good. But the idea is, there are a bunch of like this is a figure, which is time series for them. This is figure, like maybe. So this is for Buffy, for example. There are 144 episodes, so we would kind of zoom out. This is like for each episode. This would maybe like just one score for each episode, something like that. Depends if you have that or not. It could be, if you have one book, then it could be just chapters, and you just sort of indicate where the chapters are, which is also non-trivial at a larger scale. I put this in from series heat as an example. Like you could imagine this being a power, danger, structure score. And you want power, danger, and then also the dangerous power and safe power axes as well, because we want to see which one is really going on. Bunch of other things in here. So this is just, so we can evolve that. And the idea is that this will become kind of a template for doing it. I'll try to update the paper as well. Excitement. Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk about some other pieces here. Oh, I do think I should mention this. I tweeted this from the Hedonimeters website from Twitter. That's an old format.
Quick question. Does that mean I probably shouldn't push the Python script I have to get transcripts from that website?
It has all the transcripts in it.
Well, it's like it's a script I wrote to like get all do the thing they told us not to do. So probably not having that on the repo. Yeah.
Right. Right. Sometimes this thing gets a lot of play, but not this one. Anyway, I just want to show. So the war crime story that's emerging as Russia's retreating or being pushed out is actually being talked about on Russian Twitter. So that's sort of the observation here, right? So this is Russian language Twitter. This is the start of the what is it? Special operation? Is that what they're calling it? The war, this horrific thing in Europe. It sort of comes back up. It does. It's not coming back to the same level, and so this is really unusual in the history of Twitter for any language. We don't really see that. Right? So George Floyd's murder. This is about a month now. Eventually came back up. Pandemic came back up. So even just seeing this kind of collective trauma at all was something we didn't really see till 2020 in English. Lots of bad things happened, but nothing stuck. Anyway, this is the weekend, and it's a sort of emerging that there evidence of war crimes, civilians, killed. It is horrific. This is Ukrainian Twitter. We have less data for it, and as I've sort of showed you, right, this has been down. It was down with the Crimean invasion of Crimea in 2014. Has stayed down the whole time. This is the start of the war, so it's sort of down. Maybe kind of bubbled up a little bit, but so both languages have. This is the translation. Both languages have. This is Russian, so there's crime, different words for different variations on crime, but also this is relative just a week before. So lots of terrible words here about kill and murder, but there's also shame again. There was shame immediately, and I think horror as well. So they're sort of like a resurgence of those things. It's Russian Twitter. I mean, we have the caveats at the bottom, right? It's not everything. And that Ukrainian Twitter has a similar sort of thing. But this has been this hard thing. I don't know. Maybe you've seen some of this. Interviews with Russians on the street saying it's fine. We should take over Ukraine as Russia. But like people on the street being asked things in Russia, presumably are not going to say, "We think this is a bad idea." No way. So it's really hard to understand. Understandably, it's very hard to kind of get a sense of what's going on. But this is a weird lens, but it is something, and it does suggest there's actually a response to that.
Yeah. It's interesting, like how Russia actually had their war rally essentially the day after they started arresting people for speaking out in public against the war. So they didn't make it mandatory for anyone to go.
Yeah, it's a good idea, though, right?
Well, everyone was like, "Oh, I get it."
Yeah.
But it was interesting because the same day, a bunch of people that were at the rally were tweeting about how terrible they were.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about these sort of. I mean, all of this is looking at corpora in some way. Corpora is such a terrible term. Corpus. So I keep playing around with words for this, but I'm not happy with it. But large scale text, right? But they're temporarily evolving. There's something going on, like there's some evolution. And so this is going to be about books. This was incredibly exciting when this appeared, 2011. It's a science paper. And back then, I remember in Pucks and these sort of old lectures of mine, I still kind of have some versions of this, I suppose. But when I started talking about data and so on, this was a slide that I added, some version of this slide that I added, because I'm like, look at this. This is crazy, right? The initial work we did with Hedonimeter, as you've seen, right, we did music. We looked at music lyrics. We looked at State of the Union and blog posts. Twitter and Facebook, which is inaccessible, but they hadn't really even sort of made their mark. But the State of the Union, we were trying to find something like, was there something online where we could get some sense of history at the century scale, right? Like some text that we could, however, weirdly look at in this big way. And I think that's basically all we could come up with. And there's the presidency, might not be the American presidency project at UC Santa Barbara, where they've tried to put all the documents online. It's a good thing, but of course stuff is all like, you have to go and click on a thing and read what Reagan's State of the Union speech was in 1982 or something, like if you want it. So it's good. And they're also a little bit funny because some of them are speeches, some of them are just documents that were submitted to Congress. So it's a bit mixture. Anyway, but my point is, we were trying to get from at least one part of the world some sort of historical text that was somewhat coherent, at least in concept. And it did indicate things. Okay, so this comes along and is really transformative. There's a big claim, right? This is going to be culturomics. I mean, obviously we make up funny words like this too, but the omics is a big one. Like this is, it's like on for particles, protons and photons. You just add an on to the end of it, and it sounds like you've got something that's. So I haven't really stuck with it, but storions, was the sort of idea, because engram is a terrible term. It's just awful. So I kind of wanted to push. Maybe I'll still do that. Storions, right? We want to smash the story into storions. Which my main inspiration for that is. Let me find this one for you. I think this has got to be. Come on. It's the onion. Come on, onion. Yeah, there it is. It's great. They split the smithereen. This term, smithereen, split something in this, you smash something in the smithereens. It's such a great line. But they've been able to split it into smithereens. Of course, we have morphemes, and linguistics has these things, but I don't think they were thinking about emojis when we did that. It's always cumbersome. We split it into words and phrases. Or engram, engrams just means you hate people as soon as you say that, right? It's just like, it's an accepted term, but it's just like, we want to jargonize the crap out of this. Anyway, that was pretty enjoyable. But we've got obviously, so culture. Let's see how this website is doing. I don't know if they've updated. No, maybe that's not it. That's not. I've got to. That's my fault for spelling things wrong. Yeah. Ooh, follow us on Twitter. Let's see how we're doing. Yeah. Oh, it's one of the main people. Anyway, okay. It got a little stuck. Wow. This thing has been evolving somewhat, although this is still the same opening page as from whenever. And our story wrangler thing is the same kind of idea, but for Twitter, with what I'll describe as a really important kind of departure. So this is English. They have a number of versions. There's a 2009 one, 2012, and then they redid everything in 2019. So there have been there's a lot of criticisms of this. Ben Schwartz, who's at Ben Schmidt, who's at NYU in humanities there, and digital humanities, heads the group there at the center, has written a lot of criticisms. So we'll talk about some of the problems. But the thing is, this looks pretty powerful. It's a time series, right? So you say, boom, I've got a time series. Look, Frankenstein is more popular than Albert Einstein and Sherlock Holmes, although Sherlock Holmes seems to be doing well recently. So it's pretty compelling. And you can, take a screenshot or whatever and share it, put it, tell people this is how things are working. If you go back, this is, somewhat different. There's English fiction. There's a bit funny. There's different languages. there is an attempt to sort English fiction and let's go British English, American English. So as in the writers are. So this is all of English. So this is weird. There's obviously something going kind of, well, what's happened is, this data set just stopped here, right? They didn't update it. So it looks a little weird to do that. Let's see how figure looks. Okay, so all of these are going to be tanked here. So we could, it's sort of not fair to look at this older data set in that way. It's kind of interesting. It's stuck. Right. So here's this is cherry picking, right? So this is just one example. I can't tell you everything, but it's an illustration of a bigger issue. So these are English books, English language books. And Google's claim is that they, at least to start with, they had 4% of all books, I think, in the very first, that underlay the first paper, where various robots and humans took books apart and scanned them all and then did optical character recognition, which has some problems because, some of the older texts are a little bit funny with F's and S's and things are a little bit, so there are some glitches. It's fine. Let's see about Google, by the way. Kind of weird, right? So, and you need to do Google capital. Okay, yeah. So there's also, so googly is in cricket when you're bowling and you're a leg spinner, and instead of making it turn that way, you rotate your wrist around this way so much that it spins that way. Also called in Australia, you call it the wrong one.
Yeah, that sounds.
It's rough on the arms. Like the people's leg spinners in particular, like off spinners just come through and just kind of just tweak it like that. But leg spinners, it's like, it's a real art. It's different. Baseball and cricket are just not to be compared, right? So they're not the same thing. It's like comparing baseball to football. They're just different things. So I just want to say that. It took me a while to realize that different things. So you might say, well, what about knuckleballs? It's not the same thing as knuckleball. Anyway, that's what a googly is wrong. Different things have emerged over the years. There's one called the Doosra, which comes out of, I think, Sri Lankan bowlers, which means the other one. So instead of a catcher or whatever, there's a wicketkeeper who might, they're talking, and they said bowler Doosra or whatever, which, like the English speakers, they didn't know what they're talking. So it sounded like a special thing, but it just meant the other one. Yeah. Anyway, it's an endlessly fascinating game. But it's weird, right? There's Google. Google was pretty big back then. That's kind of weird. That's super weird. English fiction, if we go to, I am criticizing an older thing. Figure in English fiction, okay, it's kind of there. And then English fiction, 2019, bit different. Kind of worries me, actually. That kind of worries me. Why? I'll get to why this is a... There's just not a lot in here. That's the other thing in here. Let's say compared to figure. Another little detail here is you separate search terms with a comma, which is sort of a natural thing. The problem is comma is the most common 1 gram across. So it's, it's sort of a nice, it's like saying you're not allowed to search for the, right? I mean, we know it's not a word, it's a punctuation, but it is the most common lexical object. So it's a bit of a shame. So you sort of see, like, when we do it at this scale with just a lowercase f, there really aren't many capital F ones, and this is sort of fine. All right, so what am I talking about? The issue here is that, especially in this initial one and various cleanup attempts to clean it up, it was full of science. So you think it's books, because it's the N-gram project for books. It's 1 gram through 5 grams. It's a lot. So you kind of feel like they went to libraries, which they did, but they also pulled out medical books and scientific writing. So what you see through this period of time, particularly through the 20th century, is this increase in scientific terminology. So things like, let me say 953, going to do English. Do English. So this is kind of interesting. 1888. They sort. This is we've done work like this, and I'll get to it later on. But this is one of the most compelling things they showed early on, and I have some other plots from them. So this is just the numbers, right? 1888, but it's the years, and so you see them not reasonably sort of peak in the year or nearabouts. 1920. The ends of decades, like 1900, is a little funny because it's a bit different, but specific years or whatever. So you can kind of play around with it. And the claim with this is, you see there's this longer tail here, but as sort of time goes on, there's more discussion about what's going on now, but then it's forgotten more quickly, right? So bigger peak, but drops off faster. And this one is sort of lingering. So the claim from that was, like, culturally, things are speeding up. Like we're more here now. 2022 matters, blah, blah, blah. We talk about it all the time. But as time goes on, it's going to wash out more rapid, relatively. I mean, and so this is the thing. You can tell lots of stories here. So we'll look at that a little bit. If you go to English fiction, that's still true there. But I think if you go to English fiction now, see, 920 is a little funny. Let's do a 920, 7. Then you see they basically look the same. So this is in theory just fiction books. It turns out that English fiction, and I don't know about the most recent one, also has literary criticism in it. So it's a bit of a weird object. This is a very strange data set. I mean, it's super interesting because everything's being pulverized, smashed into story-ons, right? So 1 grams, 2 grams, 3 grams. You can look up. When you get up, just something about the combinatorics of that is, as you look at the volumes, if you get the data for yourself, there are a lot of 1 grams. There are more 2 grams, which makes sense. There are even more 3 grams, like huge amount, because it's exploding. But then 4 and 5, it goes down. And the reason for that is the 5s have, I think there are, like, when we go back to types and tokens, in terms of types, the number of unique 5 grams is vast, but the tail is really, really long. So there are a lot of them that appear once. Like the number that appear once is gigantic. So if you have a threshold for the counts that you'll include, as the thing gets longer, you tend to exclude more and more of the tail. So you tend to get 5 grams that are in this data set that are repeated, that are quotes, stuff from the Bible. Like it loses some of its strength. And 3 grams are really a sweet spot. There's just a lot you can do with 3 grams. Did I ever show you that 3-word thing for locations in the world? It's kind of interesting.
Well, I mean, it also makes sense in terms of just, like, if you think about, like, the way people write, like, lists, or, like, write, it's all, like, in terms of 3s, like comedy rule of 3. When people are, like, writing lists of attributes, like adjectives, they tend to, like, write them blank.
Proposals, you should give them 3 ideas.
Yeah. So, like, it makes sense that our, like,
it's not bad. It's sort of a minimum level of complexity. A colleague of mine, Neil Johnson, wrote a book called 2 is something, 2 is company, 3 is complexity, I think was sort of the popular book name. You can still have complexity from 2 things, but 3 is definitely when you start to get, accept all of the cookies. Give me that cookie. So, the idea of this is that, okay, I know you're excited, is that so this is New York City Hall, right? I think it's 3 meters by 3 meter grid across the whole world, and each one has a 3-word, aware, sadly, awake. They're pretty good words, right? So if you go to the next little blob across, during foil finishing. So you can reference anything. So what are we in? We're in Lafayette. So this is it's still around, which is kind of interesting. Okay, so here's Burlington. I don't think it's got my location, right? Where are we? Here? We're kind of about here. I guess I'm giving away the location to the back guys. Let me get that in the middle. Boop, boop, boop. I don't know. We're about here, right? Input blame tower. So you could say, send it to input blame tower, and then Grubhub would turn up with your your bagels or whatever, because that's the address that they use. So this is sort of a nice idea, right? What I'm trying to get to here is that there's just this incredible combinatorial explosion, right, around three words, and they can be, but these aren't, chemical names or something weird, or right. They're sort of in the middle of the zip distribution. There isn't a the here or whatever. If you randomly chose from it, wouldn't work out. They're pretty good little 3 grams, right? So this is maybe where you're sitting. Shrimp pass list. Anyway, it's sort of a kind of, it was something they could do because of that incredible flexibility. So this is this story here for this cultural memory thing. I think it's 1883, 1910, and maybe 1950. And so boop, boop, boop. And so the suggestion, from this, you say, oh, look at this, look at how culture is changing, at least into. And when we think about books, we have to think about the authors and editors and publishers. They're choosing to put these books into right. They're going to have, we know they have a heavy tail distribution for success, but this is what's being chosen put in. And it's also, it's like what matters kind of now. It's going to be based on the last few years, or maybe it's history as well, but, science fiction. But it's sort of kind of, it's different to, tweets, which is like, well, Will Smith slaps Chris, like, that explodes, right? That's just, everyone tweets about that. It's a giant thing. Or the BTS didn't win a Grammy or whatever, right? Like, it's just, they were pretty magnanimous about it. Next year, we're going to get there. That their butter thing was really good. They pulled off a heist themed song in the Grammys. Apparently, it was pretty great, actually. Yeah, but like that's going to wash out of here, right? Like, because you got so many voices in books. It's a really interesting thing to look at this time scale. Anyway, what I'll say is this goes away, as I showed you with if we look at, say, the English fiction now. You don't see this, right? These are all basically the same shape. There's no sense that things are speeding up or slowing down. So from that English fiction point of view, it's not really there. They have so these are political figures, authors, actors, biologists, and the bottom is mathematicians. And so they're sort of ordered by how much they're talked about based on their age. So mathematicians never become talked about in books, right? Not quite that much. But these are political figures, they have, right? They can't be kids, so they have to get to some age really huge by this point and take off, right? So, political figures is everyone: Churchill, Hitler, blah, blah, blah. Right? And I think authors tend to, kind of grow with the age as well. I mean, these are not unreasonable things to sort of, to speculate. This is about suppression. So this is German is the red one here, and this is English, and they've kind of put everyone together. And what they're trying to do is this. So if someone's talked about, this is hard to see, I realize. Yeah. If this is, it's a pretty rough thing. So this is German, the mentions of Henri Matisse. Peaks here, peaks even higher, drops here, right? And so this is the Nazi regime. Like, it's just not, there's a suppression, censorship thing that's going on, and I think they basically just do this. They sort of say, well, it should be here. This is where it is. So that ratio is the suppression index for that person. They get a list of people they think are important, so that that's not automatically done, presumably. So it's a little messy, but they get this sort of story out of it. Yes, that there was censorship, right? We can kind of quantify it. It's not, everyone knows there was, but this is part of the natural evolution of science. Like, okay, like just how much? And it could have been that it was undetectable. Could have been. This is Matisse. So he's a very strongly suppressed one. Picasso here, so they're indications of where they are. So you can see English doesn't really it's centered around one. It's sort of just like in and out of favor a little bit, but not that just is not unreasonable. Big claim. So what's the big problem with all of this? Well, first of all, I said science is going through it all. This is the second one is that's another fame thing, but let's Barney Rubble. I like to use my rhyming slang here. This is okay. Let's get that to work. So we published a paper as a graduate student, Eitan Pachenik. This is his main thing from his PhD, because we went to this thinking, oh, all right, let's find out some other fun things in this. And we looked at it and looked at it and looked at it and ended up with this paper, which has been, it's well cited. It's actually on the Wikipedia page for this thing, which is nice. We have no control over that. It's kind of surprising because usually, when you have something turn out to be wrong, it doesn't necessarily get cleaned up, much as science might think it does. So, and the kind of great danger is you can just make these figures and boom, and tell a story about it straight away. So this paper, and I'll talk about it a little bit, it points to two main things. One is that scientific literature was increasingly was just incorporated, and that's what I should say. This kind of thing, that's science. So the famous works, Big Science, Little Science by De Sola Price, showed that there's all these kind of beautiful patterns like half-lives for journals. Like a paper appears and looking at the citations going back into the journal itself, like that shrinks over time, et cetera, right? There are lots of things. So this is, and even just like these years, just the mention of years, the citation, right? Because you're citing all these papers. So how far do you look back into the past? There's another one we could do if we go back to, let's try, I'm criticizing the older one, but there's still a main problem. So for example, et al.
So easy.
Have you seen the Google Scholar for et al? Okay, you go look at it. It's not even close, is it? It's moving, which I look at it now and then I feel upset with myself and I don't know what to do. I think it's this. That's not it. There's a much bigger, yeah, okay, where is it? Come on.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, here it is. Yeah, that's the right one. I mean, it's also Google. The thing with Google is they make some amazing things, but they never quite finish them, and they sort of just let it hang. And they eventually got, like Google Flu Trends, it was a great idea. And it worked for a couple of years, and then like, it didn't work this year. I mean, I don't know. They lack finish, Google. They lack finish. I mean, it's, Apple's good at finish. That doesn't mean it's whatever. But, they do lack that. I mean, there's, Microsoft is evolving actually, but it's generally, I mean, Jobs said it apparently, like they have no taste, and it was not wrong. It's just terrible. The Xbox was a huge success. Anyway, this is pretty amazing. Yeah. I mean, Lowry, this is, I think, the most cited paper of all time, actually. This Lowry one. Protein measurement. Yeah.
one paper has that many citations.
Right? Yeah. This paper is huge. So, yeah. O.H. Lowry.
They should have a number of
Yeah.
citations where like you're not allowed to cite it anymore. Like once you get it, you just get to reference.
Well, this has been studied because it does happen, right? At what point, and I don't know what the term is, but and I think Robert Merton came up with this. Oh, it's definitely one of his things. At some point in time, it just becomes kind of folk knowledge, or just like this is just true. Yeah.
Like, are we citing Newton when we talk about the laws of gravity?
Or like 3+4=7. Like we don't, like we don't. Yeah.
I will say the pure mathematicians got it down there, where they're just like, we're just going to give the theorems numbers, and you can just reference them.
Yes, but it's so socially constructed still because they want things named after them. It's such a giveaway. It's such a giveaway. Anyway, the censorship one was kind of here. I mean, this is more details for that. I mean, it's compelling, sure. But here's the second big problem. So they've rectified things a little bit, I think, with the science, where they've kind of cleaned that out. Because what you don't have is metadata. It's just like, we did all the books. Actually, they're not books like we would think of books, right? It's a big mess. Because a lot of those books in libraries are, here's a journal. So they've kind of cleaned that up. You can see it sort of over in the various iterations. Like English fiction, for example, doesn't seem to have scientific literature in it, just in terms of these big rule things. But there is a deeper thing, and this is true of all these corpora, is each book counts once, right? I should say once, right? So you go to a library, you scan everything, you get all the engrams out of that, and they go into a big hopper. So that's a huge problem, right? Because you don't look at the borrowing cards or the usage cards or how many sales that there have been, right? So if we wanted to, and look, we've all done it. Everyone who works with corporates, generally speaking, and sort of for the danger of power thing, right? We talk about types and tokens. Like, let's look at how words are actually used, and that's where we see that safety bias thing come out, right? Or the happiness bias. That's where I don't see people do this much. They just sort of don't. They just take flat lexicons. And when you go to a book, the thing is, there is a skewed distribution, right? There's already the fact that the and of and there's already this big zip distribution for language itself. So you have this deep sense of like popularity, right? Like ranks of things. It's already there. It's just how language works. But there's the zip distribution that you have from that. Then there's a big indexing which gives you another zip distribution of what people actually talk about. Which books did they read? Which ones did they get excited about? So this is search for cherry picking. This ages you a little bit because I say it all the time to my kids. But I'm delighted that Lost in Space got remade by Netflix. Actually, the robot, Robbie the. Oh my god. Oh, so this is a really famous. Let's see. I'm sure the sound won't work. Okay. So of course it just exploded in my ears. So let me which I can handle. I guess. Wow, we're back in this little hell space. That's sort of a dead little error, isn't it? Output should be yeah. It went to my ears. Oh my god. Okay, so it's just gonna be. So there are a lot of these, and the robot is yeah. There you go. Ha ha ha. My dad would reference this sometimes. See? This is how it lives on. This could be a good one too. Oh yeah. The music, the 50s. That's amazing. Yeah, so Netflix remade it. In a modern version. With a different kind of thing. Yeah, Danger Will Robinson, for sure. Yeah. It's awesome. Yeah. Actually, see, it is fun to play with this thing. There's no question. Like, so this is cherry picking. So it's a funny software tool. Danger. Yes.
Was it in a meme?
This is late, so 80s, they go 80s. It's funny because it's definitely, it dropped.
Was there a meme in the late 90s, early 2000s about it or something?
Memes weren't called, when were memes called memes? There wasn't, so you had to have the internet come along, or the web, which is only two. This stuff's spreading, but it's not, yeah, it's not. So, right, memes is, what's his name? Damn it. This Richard Dawkins, it's The Selfish Gene. This is where he, just in this book, he comes up with this idea of meme, cultural units that are preserved over time. Um, and it was a big deal. Yeah, everyone's excited, but no one could figure out what a meme was or measure it. And it got and there's like fields of memetics. Um, it's sort of obvious that there's a thing, right? There's a thing like, how to boil water or whatever it is, like how to bowl a googly. These are memes, right? Or cultural units, right?
Yeah, the cultural parallel to biological genes.
Yeah. So, and they really wanted it to be just the same. So they kind of wanted it to like them to fight. And stories do fight wars, like there's definitely something there, but uh, there's a lot of arguing and hand wringing. And anyway, over time, the web develops. We eventually just call it the internet, and then people start putting up cats with hamburgers, cheeseburger cat, and then it's all over. And it's like that's what a meme is. It's just and the GIF gets invented, or the GIF, and like that becomes a thing. All gets fused together, and basically a meme, instead of like how to hunt for food on the savannah, is a smart ass kind of joke in 6 seconds. But jokes have been forever, right? So it is. I mean, it's reasonable, but it got sort of meme itself. Meme meme is a meme, and then it changed. It got preserved, but it evolved away from where it was supposed to be to start with, and now it's its
The
own.
first meme, like internet meme, is so terrifying.
Oh no! Oh, it's the dancing baby.
The dancing baby.
Yeah, yeah. Which was some animation thing, right? Yeah, like
The first, it was like 96. Was the first like viral meme.
people were emailing it to each other. That's how that was being spread because you didn't have other. There's direct messaging existed, but it was not on phones, I don't think. But like AIM, the AOL instant messenger, but that was just a little box, and I don't think you could put like emojis are a recent thing, right? I mean, if emoticons were what you could send with that, it's just text. I don't think you could send any images.
Do you remember when like the news didn't know how to say memes? So they'd be like,
Memi.
yeah, like the newscasters like put a sign over it. That was an innocent time.
Well, now we're talking about meme warfare, right? I mean, now like Russia is trying to like meme Ukraine to death or something. And it's like, okay, that's fine. Like if you hear that, you're like, sure, I guess they're doing.
You know about the five-star party in Italy?
No.
It's basically
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Because
basically
they can have so many parties, right?
started by memes. Like this guy is like a tech billionaire type, and he had a front man as a comedian that like posted publicly these things, but they were all coming from him. And he like marshaled enough support that they took over like a bunch of seats in parliament.
So it was a joke. It was a bit. It was just doing a.
It wasn't. It's this
Oh, it
guy
was serious.
weird desire for power.
Are you talking about the really
Okay.
guy that became prime? I'm talking about when like
Well, no,
Italian
this.
friends
I
yesterday.
don't think he became anything public.
Oh,
You,
okay.
are you're talking about
Because there have been like, first of all, a dozen Italian presidents and prime ministers in the last 15 years.
also
The Italian
Australia's been doing that too, by the way. Yeah.
The Italian government has fallen apart and like reformed
Yeah.
so many times
Yeah.
in the past like
Yeah.
10 years. It's crazy.
Well, some of the European countries have rules about. Um, they have rules about. So they end up with a lot of parties because of kind of the rule structure. And the US has ended up with two, also because of its rule structure. Like you'd have to change things in a fundamental way to split that up. But you tend to get a lot of parties in some of those countries because they had fascism. They tried to set up things to So it's hard to start a new party as well, although means help. So I remember a long time ago, Australia has states, and then it had two territories: Australian Capital Territory, which is like Brasilia, or sort of like the DC. This kind of compromise where you build something and say this is the capital. It's like in the middle of. It's not Melbourne. It's not Sydney. So everyone could be happy except Western Australia, who are 5 million miles away. But it's off by itself, and it's got this own little ACT. It's this Australian capital, and the Northern Territory, which is up the top, and it's huge. But they started to make them kind of more self-governing, and the very first election, I think they may have had like hundreds of parties because they just didn't really give any guidelines, and one was called the party. There were lots of themed around barbecue, whatever. It was just mad. It was total madness. You feel a little careful. Well, Zelensky, right? I mean, he was a comedian.
They put a show on
Who,
Netflix. Yeah, you should watch it.
who had it's very on the nose. I mean,
Oh my
a
god.
three-season TV show where he played accidentally becoming the prime minister or the president, and it was funny.
Also,
Trying to get into the EU, jokes, haha.
I watched like 3 seasons, like the first 3 episodes. The first 3 episodes. I was like, yes, I see what you want. Like, it's the best. Like,
It's funny. He's charismatic,
he's like they
right?
frame it as him being like this like history teacher who like really cares about the people and was like this
Right.
social activist in college and then just
Right.
became a school teacher and like got nominated because some like his students took a video he didn't know about him ranting about how bad
Well,
corrupt
look,
the government was.
we're going to come back to Trump. We're getting to Trump with this, and Trump's big thing, right? I mean, he's failed so many times. I mean, his truly big thing is he's a storyteller who just simply never gives up, right, and wants to win everything. So that's his skill set. And I mean, I'm going to claim, but he was, not great, Lots of things failed. It's The Apprentice, which is, it's TV, it's stories, it's made up. Seems like a great leader, and that was the thing, which itself is Survivor recast, right? Because it's Mark Burnett, also someone trying to make things take off. Survivor is this huge success, like revolutionizes or transforms television. Revolution strong transforms it, into reality shows, and of course it's still going, right? I mean, it's unbelievable. But that was Survivor recast into the city. That was the idea, and he kind of was trying. From what I understand, he came up with this as a, tropical island, still very beautiful and crazy. Let's try to do something in the city. What would it be? This boardroom thing. So he's got a platform where it's like gets talked about. So the U.S. has done that. It's not unreasonable that those people have just huge audiences potentially, right? So it's not it's not Hulk Hogan. Who was Minnesota's governor for a while? Was it a wrestler? Schwarzenegger?
Oh, he was California.
No, Schwarzenegger's California, but there was a wrestler who was governor of. I've got that. The name's not. I don't know wrestling, but whatever it is, the pretend wrestling, the which everyone is fine with, right? I mean, it's sort of yeah.
The QAnon people, like really believe that TV and movies give them hints about what's going to happen in the real world, and people make fun of them for that, but they're maybe not as wrong as that, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you just gave some examples of that happening.
Well, certainly, yeah. I mean, the stories you tell matter tremendously, but the other thing is, of course, there's so much media and so much out there that you can stick some things together. And yeah, exactly right. The crumbs are there. There are so many crumbs. There are so many types of crumbs, and you can wind a thing through it all. The degree to which you can get other people to believe it, that's a tough one. I mean, we've talked about this in terms of a very similar sort of. I mean, I feel fits into this is the biolabs in Ukraine that the U.S. put in there and Fauci put in there, and there are all these biolabs which are existential threats to Russia. That was not a story going as when Russia started the invasion. 2 weeks later, it had bubbled out of someone just crazily say that wrote it somewhere. I mean, it's been tracked in the US and kind of got amplified and took off. And then it's on, but then it's on, Russian news eventually, right? And it's like, this is why we're doing it. I mean, the thing is, you can just wait. So there's individuals like the QAnon, but the people, if you're a powerful media, you can wait for people to create the stories and then, basically farm them.
Jesse Ventura.
Jesse Ventura. Yeah.
Big Trump guy.
There you go. I mean, people will talk about in years past, Jon Stewart or Colbert running, right? I mean, Colbert fits probably into the Zelensky model as well as anyone. People know who they are. They have some trust with them. They kind of. I mean, Reagan was an actor. Right? I mean, there's the presence you have. I mean, there are a lot of people in this world who probably think they know who Kylie Jenner quite well, or Kim Kardashian. Like they're quite close to them. I mean, they sort of are, right? Because it's very one way, obviously, but it's a lot. Maybe not all the reality of whatever, but a lot. And if you sort of pay attention to them, then they're a real. I mean, reading a book, you can feel like you really know these people, and if someone dies or whatever. I mean, this is one of the story things. Like people, it really affects them. Like the end of The Good Place, right? It really. This is just a show. You're watching a rectangle. It's a rectangle with some people on it. It's all pretend, but you're like destroyed. You gotta leave that one. Yeah. All right. We got Danger Will Rose. They have lots of pieces in here, right? So this is like just talking about, where flus are being talked about, right? Blah blah blah. Like, of course, this would include now the flu and then COVID. You're making these comparisons, and you're trying to say these giant things about cultures. I mean, this is huge. Like, oh look, okay, the English didn't really think about feminism. I mean, the thing is, it's at least a kind of basic indicator that it's present in the language. It's present in the discussion. It doesn't really tell you how popular it is. If you look at something like, this has changed, I think, but Gandalf, I think this has changed. But you can see the effects of Lord of the Rings being released in different ways. And, the early versions, and we have this in the paper, Frodo is just sort of like, even though terms culturally at that point, let's see, what about Harry Potter? Yep. So, I mean, that seems reasonable. It's like talked about a lot. But this is the most recent version of it. It's a little bit better. You might feel happy about this. But this is like, let me go back to the old one. All right. We will I'll release you in a second. But Gandalf. Yeah, this is pretty weird because it's going through to 2000. I guess it doesn't have. When did the first movie come out? Wait, which year? And something that we didn't look at, but all right. Yeah, so it does get some. You would think that it should be more popular here than any time before, right? This is a giant thing, and we haven't talked about this. I haven't talked about this, but this is Benjamin Schmidt did some of this where there's something really we've noticed. There's something very weird happens after 2000. It's just the way they collected texts because they started to get them more digitally, I think, and just. So the thing is, you weren't really having the same things in every bin, right? The corpus was kind of changing in how it was accumulated. And if you're going to make a time series out of it, it's really problematic. So these are big statements. Freud is more famous than Einstein. Da, da, da. These are what you could argue that this is what authors and publishers have put into books. It's not what people have read, right? It's not what people have really focused on. So Harry Potter takes off, but if you really index that by how many times people actually read Harry Potter versus everything else, it would be like explode through the ceiling, right? So it's missing this giant piece, which is what's actually popular. It looks like it is because popularity is built into the way language works, ZIF distributions. But then there's this massive. So with Twitter, what we've been able to do is say, okay, let's do that, but then we have retweets as well. And then you can turn that off. You can sort of turn off the contagion. So you can look at like, what's the underlying stuff that people put out there? What was it that's retweeted? And it's quite different, you know. You can see marketing garbage as well, like stuff that's like, this is all sort of like spammy kind of tweets that doesn't get amplified. Okay, so I'll talk about more on Thursday, but yeah, people have made some pretty big statements about from this, like God is disappearing from reality, you know, from I mean, people becoming heathens basically, and you know, decrying all these like the loss of sacred words and so on. And you know, here are all the charts to prove it. Really, really problematic. So on the one hand, fantastic, interesting, what an achievement, but we have to be really careful with it because it allowed us to, you know, you could look, here is God. So just tell a story straight away. This, you know, this is from the original paper. You know, this is against the fact that science is being fed into the big hopper. And, you know, those scientific papers themselves not indexed by how much they're being read. They're being cited internally in the literature, so you get it.
Like the impact index.
Yeah, well, yeah, something like that. Those sorts of things. Like what? Right. I mean, if you go in a library and say, read every book, you give every book, every word the same amount of time, and you walk out of it, and you say, that's what this library is, versus you read it according to what everyone else is reading. Like if a book has never been read, you don't read it, right? If this book has been read 1,000 times, it gets 1,000. That's a different experience. It doesn't mean, you know, whatever, this is all socially constructed, but you're trying to figure out, like, what have people ended up focusing on? What's the thing they really talk about? It doesn't mean it's right or what they should have done, or if we ran the world again, but it is what people have talked about.
It's interesting because, like, for example, Baby Center has a thing where it's like they allow you to filter, but their default filter isn't latest posts. It's their default filter is latest activity. So it's like what post got the latest and highest amount of comments.
Yeah. So the sorting, exactly.
So
the sorting is very interesting.
And a frequency weight.
Right.
Like, well, like I didn't realize like why would they do that?
Right.
But because some of the groups they have are like so big.
Yeah.
Have so many posts.
Yeah.
That they're doing that thing.
Right. So that's been something people have been messing around for, you know, since listservs or whatever, like started to get online. Like, how do you present things to people? And Facebook, of course, going to this algorithm or, you know, like your news feed, allowed them to do whatever they wanted underneath. It was clever. It turned into a black box. Yeah. Kind of killed it for me back then. I was a late adopter and early because I'm like, I hated it. Yeah. But you know, you have a lot of stuff to sort through, so you kind of have to do something. And this mechanism that was being done by, you know, so-called elites, right? The news that you could get hold of, what the publishers chose, they were the things that got presented to you. Now you can access everything, and if you're QAnon, you can put the crumbs together and figure out anything as well. So, danger, Will Robbins.
The QAnon stuff is just so rich. There's so much there.
Oh yeah, I know. That's really weird. I just don't understand. I don't understand why he's sort of the. I mean, he's very good looking, but I don't. Isn't he from the bad side? Just JFK Jr. For whatever reason, he is. Right? I don't know.
And there's two possible reincarnation type JFK Juniors who were kind of
Oh, they're competing.
The QAnon conspiracies are so like it really shows you like
people will believe it.
Yeah, just like how much you can really warp a story if people will buy it.
Yeah.
And how easy it is to mix like
easy it is to drift, which is a depressing one.
But to your point, but I will say, I think the hardest thing now as a storyteller is not competing with the truth, right? Which is what journalists and scientists are trying to do. It's competing with other propaganda people, right? Because if you want your crazy thing that you've said made up to like manipulate people, I mean, advertisers have dealt with this forever, like, but it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard.
As the word says, a good lie can get it around the world before the truth can get its canceled.
That's right. Yeah. Was it who said? Oh yeah. I don't know where that one comes from originally. I think it comes from well, people will attribute it to various authors, I guess. But it's a fair line. Yeah, it's a fair line. The thing is that the truth is one truth and then a billion lies, and so many of those lies don't get anywhere, but one gets, it's gone.
This is why one of my friends told me that everyone should learn to code C, because not because it's like a useful skill, but because you'll have to Google so much and search. There's so much garbage online.
Because
everyone how to evaluate sources correctly on the internet, because they'll learn just how wrong most of the stuff you read is. You copy and paste it and it breaks.
About C.
Yeah. Yep.
Really?
See, it's just that there's so many people giving so many answers.
Wow, that's bad. That's really disappointing. I mean, C was sort of my first. Well, Fortran was actually, but C, yeah.
Or just
it's good. It's good, solid stuff. Yeah.
It's really hard. MATLAB would probably work. Python it's too much of a language that people like, so it's all this stuff the good stuff is floating to the top.
Except it's getting worse. Stack Overflow isn't at the top anymore. It's like some stupid blog.
It's some weird forum.
Yeah.
Or the Medium articles are the worst because they're presented in such a way that you think all of them are trustworthy. Yeah. And then you start doing them and you're like, whoa.
It's it's the same thing that happened with the recipes, but now it's happening with code results.
Yeah. Which is such a and GitHub has this issue where they made the GitHub forums where people talk about issues now. But it's hard to tell which thread is one that's worth checking on and which one is a bunch of just more of you. It's not a bunch of nonsense. Yeah, it's just I'm just watching more of me trying to figure out my problem. I'm people who also don't know what's going on.
Okay, I think.
Yeah, and it's I don't want to do that. Yeah, it's the only right solution is in Python 2. And it's I don't think this is true.
Okay, this is one of my favorite things. I've forgotten about this. Let me get this. This is a long time ago. This is 2013. Okay, I'm gonna read this out. The precondition. This is a bit. So it's from a. What is this today? This is It was about Perl. I was looking at because I like Perl, right? I felt Perl, So it's just sort of looking around to see what does everyone hate Perl now? It was a sad search. But this is good. The precondition that you can write terrible code in any language is a mental diversion. You must design languages for people that believe in intelligent design. If there is low-hanging fruit in your Garden of Eden, I'm going to read this because this is very good. People are going to assume that someone vastly smarter than them placed it there for plucking. Not even God himself coming down from on high and face-to-face telling every member of the human race not to touch it is going to keep it from being abused. That is the true nature of humanity and, by inclusion, programmers. So then he has this little text on, or they do. Perl, an unorganized but sprawling garden full of almost every imaginable fruit. Regex is a shiny, sinful apple at eye level on every single tree. The only way to navigate the garden is to ask the snakes. Python, an organized garden that has one of each kind of fruit, but it's halfway through being dug up. I guess it's Python 2.3. And replanted into an even more organized garden. Ruby, a newer garden, heaps of fertilizer make everything grow incredibly fast, but the trees are getting tangled and there's a problem with weeds. C#, that's Microsoft, obviously. Someone spent a lot of money crafting this garden correctly. They also planted trees that emit a hypnotic pollen that will murder you if you try to leave the garden. Java, a beautiful garden, but only when viewed from space. Every tree has exactly one fruit, and getting anywhere takes forever. Recently taken over by someone interested in C#'s hypnotic pollen trees. This is great. C++, an industrial farm complete with tractors and combine harvesters, but no safety equipment. As a bonus, 98% of the farm does not contain buried landmines.
The memory leaks. No safety.
Oh my god, so many memory leaks. So many things exploding on compile. A plot of land and a barn full of seeds. Get to work. JavaScript, there's only one tree, it grows upside down, but you can find it resurfacing in all the other gardens. It's also sentient, growing rapidly and trying to murder you. JavaScript is super weird because it was this ridiculous thing floating around and then just kept getting used, and it's sort of like got all these rocket ship things attached to it, make it faster and faster and faster.
And people made all the different frameworks for it that made their own, that basically became their own language. And it's like now Node.js is like kind of a language, but it's also a language.
I don't know what's going on.
When you want to use something, there's like a good chance that 2 other people have ever used it.
It's like we could have, for JavaScript, we could have used more of it getting richer. Because like there's way too many types.
Yeah. Well, it's like religion. Splintered. The church splintered. Perl's design was very nice. It was like make it a little more like language, like a little messier, like the way we do things.
I just think
Python is like,
people used to think of language as like
all right, you guys could.
all the things that programmers wanted to do, and like that's just a bad way of thinking about it. Like,
Poisonous snakes. Poisonous snakes.
Well,